Hello, and thank you for joining us for this special podcast from the Athens Banner-Herald and OnlineAthens.com. I'm Donnie Fetter here with reporter Lee Shearer, speaking with Democratic gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams. For a separate podcast featuring her Republican challenger Brian Kemp, please visit OnlineAthens.com. Hello, Ms. Abrams. Thank you for joining us today. The recent report coming from the UN about essentially we have 12 years to try to make a difference where climate change is concerned. And it doesn't seem like there's going to be any policies or actions at the federal level anytime soon to try to reverse the current trend. What could you do as governor to sort of help Georgia play its part in trying to be better stewards of the environment?
One of the first, in fact, I think the very first policy proposal we released in our campaign beginning in 2017 really looked at the issue of environmentalism, but also how we not only save and protect the planet, but also how we leverage that to create job opportunities in the state of Georgia. For me, this is incredibly important. I worked for the EPA as a college junior, and then again during my first year, right before my first year of graduate school. I focused on the environmental issues that not only assail the state writ large, but the specifics that can happen to communities if we don't pay attention. And it's often the lowest income communities that bear the strongest brunt of climate change and environmental issues. And so I think it's incumbent upon Georgia to not only have action on this, but to have really thoughtful plans. First is creating an advanced energy jobs plan, diversifying our economy, but also diversifying our response by investing in renewable energy, especially hydro, wind, and solar. We can create 25,000 to 45,000 jobs in Georgia over a decade if we are willing to put up $40 million and draw down about a quarter of a billion dollars in a quarter of a billion dollars in private financing. Those dollars can go to coding, construction, production, and it will help move us into an area where we actually have a much more robust energy grid. Number two, we have to set standards, and states across the country have done so, and Georgia has made some small moves in that direction, but not nearly enough. And I would like to join the national climate change initiatives that have been started by governors across the country in response to the retrenchment that we've seen in Washington. It is incumbent upon the leaders of our states to band together to protect our environment, and I intend to be one of the leaders in that effort.
Where might private investment come from?
Oh, private investment is waiting to come into states. They often want to make certain that there is a partnership in place, but the majority of the dollars will come from the private sector. I was down in Hinesville a couple of months ago meeting with a Coastal Solar. They are a solar production plant, and they have customers across South Georgia. I was working with them to talk about what they need and to understand how they want to continue to expand their operations. There are farmers in Camilla who now have solar farms, allowing them to repurpose some of their land, but also reduce their energy cost. And so we know that if you're in North Georgia, you've got access to hydro because of the rivers and the streams, but you also have wind opportunities because of the mountains. Georgia can rely on that not only as a means for testing, but we are also one of the states that has a dense population, which means we could absolutely use that energy influx into our energy grid. And what we have to recognize in the state of Georgia is that we're going to continue to grow. We're going to need a better mix of energy in our state, and renewable energy is not only good for the environment, it's good for the economy.
Okay. Lee, I'll pass the bat to you.
I wanted to ask you about South Georgia today, and they've been hit by a hurricane, but they've also been hit for years by economic depression. All the growth in Georgia is in Atlanta. What will you do to help them as governor?
I would expand it beyond South Georgia and talk about rural Georgia writ large, which also includes that swath of North Georgia that's north of Gainesville. And then usually when we refer to South Georgia, we really do mean everything south of the Nat line, south of Macon. The most fundamental investment we can make in rural Georgia's economy is the expansion of Medicaid, because we have to understand that economic development begins with being able to attract good jobs, and that means having a quality of life that businesses recognize. No manufacturing company is bringing jobs to a community where if someone gets hurt, it takes them 2 hours to get to a doctor. No company is going to relocate to a neighborhood where there isn't a doctor or an OB/GYN or a primary care physician. And in the state of Georgia, we have a dearth of those physicians throughout our state, and particularly in rural Georgia. If we expand Medicaid, we will draw down $8 million a day to invest in healthcare. We will draw down $3 billion a year. We will create 56,000 jobs, 60% of which are outside of Metro Atlanta. And when's the last time we had an economic development opportunity, the bulk of which would actually benefit non-Atlanta? That's why Medicaid expansion is so important. It will provide access to health insurance to 500,000 Georgians. And we have to remember, our healthcare system in America is based on insurance. So access to Medicaid is the only way we shift the costs from everyone else in the state of Georgia, and we actually can start to use health insurance to provide access to service. But if we do that, if we start with Medicaid expansion, it's more than just getting access to healthcare, which is critical, but it's an economic development engine. We know that Medicaid expansion will generate $6 billion in economic output throughout the state of Georgia, largely concentrated in the areas where we make the most investment. And because of the number of rural hospitals that we need to recreate or create as clinics, that means those are communities that are going to start to see immediate benefit. And we know it works. If you look at Kentucky, if you look at Arkansas, if you look at rural Ohio, Medicaid expansion helped build opportunity in all of those communities. Closer to home, Louisiana expanded Medicaid and in a single year saved $199 million. I begin with Medicaid expansion because it's the linchpin for all of the other things we need to do. So here's how that works. If you want to improve education, which is another way that you improve quality of life in rural Georgia, you save counties dollars, you save communities dollars if they aren't spending those dollars on uncompensated care. Basically, poor people who go to the hospital and they can't afford to pay it. But you also create more opportunities because you bring more people into those communities who have higher paying jobs and have better opportunities. But I also want us to invest in rural broadband access. The next issue that businesses think about before they relocate, or that small businesses have to consider, is whether or not they can communicate with the rest of the state and the rest of the world. We have to solve for rural broadband. And I was proud to fight legislation that was proposed by Republicans years ago that would have blocked the ability of rural Georgia to actually solve the problem themselves, working through municipalities, doing what Sumter County just recently did. Number 3, we have to invest in transit. If you live in Taylor County, you can't get to a hospital or a grocery store without using someone else's transit because you don't have any in Taylor. So we have to provide access to transit, not as an Atlanta issue, but as a statewide issue. And then lastly, I want to create a small business financing fund for $10 million a year. And here's why this matters. I've started a small business, and I lost our business because we couldn't access capital. In the midst of the Great Recession, Georgia lost more banks than any other state in the nation. And that means that if you're a small business owner that needs access to capital, unless you've got a good friend willing to loan you the money, you have to hope that a bank will loan it to you, and that doesn't always happen. My intention is to actually make sure we create this pool of money, because as much as we get excited about Amazon bringing 50,000 jobs to Georgia, I want to be the governor who invests in 10 new jobs each in 5,000 businesses, because those are 50,000 businesses located in rural Georgia that never leave. And that combination of ideas and those comprehensive plans really are what we need to look at, because anyone who tells you it's as simple as deregulation or a little bit of investment is ignoring the comprehensive challenge facing rural Georgia. I grew up in Mississippi, and even in the cities we're a little bit rural. And so as a business owner, as a state leader, and as a civic leader, I understand that we have to have a governor who's more than a single issue governor, and who understands the intersectionality of the challenges that rural Georgia faces and is willing to put our money where our mouths are.
Go back to healthcare for a moment. Mm-hmm. Would you support legislation that would end surprise billing?
Yes.
Because I know that's an issue for a lot of people already currently on health care.
Oh, I've faced it, and part of this.
I faced it.
And there you go. And that's one of the reasons I want us to think comprehensively about healthcare. We begin with Medicaid expansion because Medicaid expansion actually helps us solve a number of other issues in our healthcare system. Georgia has a state-based healthcare finance system. Mm-hmm. Counties run a lot of our hospitals. We have a lot of nonprofit hospitals. If you're outside of the metro areas, then you're largely relying on state-based healthcare, and even even in our urban areas. Medicaid expansion adds new customers, which means we can actually pay doctors more. We can increase reimbursement rates. That's the amount we actually pay doctors and nurses and medical professionals. That means they make more. They actually are paid their worth, because right now they get paid pennies on the dollar, which is why they often don't agree to see patients. You can increase that opportunity, but you can also then start putting more pressure on insurance companies to do right by everybody. In states that have expanded Medicaid, 11 states in the most recent study by Kaiser found that there was a decrease by 7 to 10% of private sector premiums, not those on Medicaid expansion, but those in the private sector, those who are on employer-based health care. That solves some of the challenges, but then you raise another challenge. Surprise billing comes about in part because we don't have a lot of leverage and we don't have a lot of argumentation power. I've had some medical procedures where the bill I got when I got home made me wonder if they should have just kept my gallbladder inside.
Yeah.
And it was a little late to have that conversation, but I hadn't planned for it to cost that much money for me to be sick. And I do have very good insurance. And so, yes, we have to deal with surprise billing. We also have to continue to talk about value-based care, making sure that people are getting the care they need and they're not just being rushed out of the door because the medical profession and the insurance companies are trying to save money. Our medical system should be designed to make people better. And that can't happen unless we have a comprehensive approach to healthcare finance. I'm a tax attorney by training with a specialty in healthcare finance. So I'm very bullish on this issue, and I understand the economics at play here. And it will help not only rural areas, but it will help Athens, Clark County. It will help this entire community, and it will help the state of Georgia if we solve this problem together.
Here, we're here at the home of the University of Georgia. Georgia has been a leader over the last decade or so in raising college costs, and college is a good bit less affordable. What would you do to help that problem?
So I'm the only candidate with a comprehensive plan on education cost. One, I think that we have to correct what has always been a flaw in the HOPE program, and that is that it requires that you have to have a B to be successful. I know there are a lot of folks with strong C's and some D's doing the best they can. And need-based aid is an area that Georgia has been woefully behind the times on. In the state of Georgia, we are one of only 2 states in the nation without a need-based aid program. That means thousands of students drop out of college, or worse, they don't challenge themselves. They don't take the classes and push themselves the way they could because they're afraid if they make a mistake, they could lose the only access they have to college. And so we have to first invest in need-based aid. Number 2, I want us to invest in service cancelable loans. That means that if you serve in a community that we know we need you in, if you serve in a field that we know we need, that if you do your part, we will cancel your loans, which means you can leave college debt-free. And our mission overall should be debt-free college for everyone. That means that, yes, you might have to work and take out Pell Grants. But if you have to take out loans, if you have to invest, it should be a commensurate investment with the yield you're going to see when you graduate. I went to some of the best colleges in the country. I went to Spelman College. I went to the LBJ School of Public Affairs. I went to Yale Law School. I'm still paying back my student loans. And while I am grateful for the opportunities I gained from that education, it is a burden. And it is a burden that we should not pass on to the next generation.
Now, I know you support more stringent gun control laws. And I think we're entering an age where more and more people are also advocating for that, regardless of their party affiliation. Now, but there's still, a vocal group that is opposed to it anyway whatsoever. What would you do as governor to sort of like sway people for your point of view, and just how much more stringent should we get with our gun control laws?
Well, I wouldn't frame it as gun control. I think we have to talk about it as gun safety, because that's what it is. My great-grandmother taught me how to shoot a shotgun. She told me 2 things. Number 1, you don't point it at anybody, because that leads you to jail. And number 2, she said, you are the person responsible, that when you hold that weapon, you are the most responsible person in the room or in the field. And that's what I'm talking about. Common sense gun safety legislation. Number 1, there is no reason that we should not, as a state, be a part of a universal background check system. A crime in one state may have a different set of conditions than a crime in Georgia, or maybe called something different. And we need to take the time to know what someone did in another state before we give them a weapon in the state of Georgia. Number 2, we need a waiting period. I would say a 3-day waiting period. And sitting here at the home of our largest university, that is incredibly important, because we know that suicide attempts, especially among young people, are on the rise. A suicide attempt that's by any means other than a weapon is 90% likely to fail. But with a gun, it is 90% likely to succeed. A 3-day waiting period means time to get help. It means if you know that there's a problem or if someone's buying a gun to do harm to themselves or others, they've got to wait. We have to have time to intercede. And for those who are worried, there is no such thing as emergency deer hunting. You can wait 3 days to get a weapon. Number 3, we need to ban assault weapons and bump stocks. I've actually fired an AR-15. It is an exciting thing to do, but the minute you start to fire it, there is no reason for this except for carnage. And there is no reason for civilians to be walking the streets of Georgia with AR-15s or with bump stocks. Number 4, we need emergency protective orders. Those are what you put in place when someone poses a danger to themselves or others and you need the court to step in. We've seen that in places where people had a lot of guns. They knew they were going to be a harm to someone, but you couldn't get anything done because the courts didn't have the authority to step in. Georgia needs to make certain that we have that authority. And last, number 5 is that we have to make certain that if you've been convicted of domestic abuse or of stalking, you cannot have a license to carry in the state of Georgia. That just enables you to be better at terrorizing the people around you. And lastly, I believe that we have to repeal campus carry and guns everywhere. There are places where weapons should not be. College campuses are one of those places. Bars are another. And we need to do a better job of protecting the vulnerable. I don't want to take anyone's Second Amendment right away. My father, every year we buy him a new gun. We got him a gun cabinet a few years ago. I like trap shooting. I like target shooting. But I know that I'm responsible, and I believe every responsible gun owner in Georgia will share my values, and we can get this done in the legislature.
Yeah, as this little side note that I know of at least 2 instances, Lee may know more. Thankfully, there's been no shootings at UGA, but I do know of 2 instances where someone left a gun in a bathroom and another person left a gun at a bus stop on campus.
Yeah.
So sort of a pattern of irresponsibility, if not, outright.
And when you have high school students who are allowed to come on campus, when you've got folks who don't know what they're doing, if they find that weapon, the number of accidental shootings the number's appalling. And we should not put the most vulnerable in our society, our young people, those who are in a vulnerable position should not be held hostage by laws that do not respect and value everyone.
Mm-hmm. I also wanted to ask you about mass incarceration. Georgia has made baby steps, but we're still a national leader in keeping people under correctional control. What would you do to further what Nathan Deal started?
I applaud and laud Governor Deal everywhere I go on the work he's done on criminal justice reform. It has been smaller steps that I know a lot of us would like, but it's further than I ever imagined we could come. And what he has been willing to do over the last 8 years has been transformational to our state. 2014, we had the 4th highest incarceration rate in the nation. Now we're down to number 9, which is still woefully high, but that is a dramatic change. We've changed the composition of those who are in our prisons, and we've created pathways for people to keep them out of jail and to help them when they leave. But the work is not done. And unfortunately, I'm the only candidate in this race with a strong, visible, and vocal commitment to continuing the work. To say that the work is done is wrongheaded. Georgia still has the number 1 ranking when it comes to people on probation and parole. And that means that they're still barred from jobs, they're barred from housing, they're barred from opportunity. And that means they're still the responsibility of the state instead of being in a position to be responsible and productive citizens in our communities. I want to do 4 things. 1, we have to decriminalize being poor in the state of Georgia. We have too many laws on our books that treat people as criminals for doing things that should really be charged with a fine. That includes traffic offenses and possession of small amounts of marijuana. We need to end cash bail. That does not make sense unless someone is violent and poses a threat. They should not be held in our jails. Decriminalizing poverty, and that means also investing in and expanding our accountability courts and doing the work we need to do to make sure that our law enforcement has the tools they need to treat people, especially those who have mental health illnesses, instead of putting them in our prisons, making sure they get treatment. And that's another reason for expanding Medicaid, because that's where those dollars will come from. Because right now our criminal justice centers are the number 1 providers of mental health support in our state, not our doctors, not our hospitals. So first is decriminalizing being poor. Number 2, we need to raise the age at which we charge a youth as an adult. We need to make that age 18. And that is something that's incredibly important, because when a young person enters the criminal justice system, they are likely going to be captured by it and remain somehow connected to it. And so we need to delay that time as long as possible and do as much as we can to intervene early. Number 3, we need to have better transition and reentry programs in the state of Georgia. Governor Deal has done some fantastic work, including creating a charter school in one of our prisons to make certain that people are getting the education they need, because we know there's a direct correlation between education and the capacity to be productive when you're released. I want to continue that work and deepen that work, but we also have to address being able to get a job by banning the box, being able to find housing by providing access to affordable housing, and having the additional supports, including mental health supports, that a lot of these communities need. And this is personal. I have a younger brother who suffers from a mental health issue as well as drug addiction, and he faces this challenge every time he's released, and it's one of the leading causes of recidivism. And then lastly, we have to make certain that we're talking about public safety as part of criminal justice reform. And that means working with our law enforcement and reconnecting them to community and making sure we're looking out for their mental health and their access, paying them a living wage. Because the stronger our relationship is with law enforcement, the easier it is to get these laws through, but also to make certain that we are doing the right thing by all people. And as governor, I want to make certain that they're getting the training they need regularly, that they have the salaries they need to take care of themselves and their families, and that we're re-emphasizing community policing.
I know we're quickly running low on time.
Sorry, I have a lot of ideas about what we should be doing.
No, that's okay. You're here as a part of a podcast because we want to hear from you, not from me and Lee. But I know we're quickly running out of time, but I have one last question that's probably more philosophical rather than concrete. With you being, should you win come November, you'll become the first African-American woman to be a governor of the United States. Yes. A trailblazer would comes to mind. Historic, certainly. Do you feel the weight of that any as you proceed toward this election? How much consideration are you giving to that?
Well, I wake up every morning as a black woman, so I'm always aware of it. But here's what I say. I'm not running because I'm black. I shouldn't win because I'm a woman. But because I am a black woman, I bring to this race and I bring to the leadership of Georgia a set of perspectives and a set of accomplishments that are very important. I have been a civic leader. I ran an organization that helped secure the right to vote for thousands of Georgians. I've been a business leader. I've helped create or retain jobs for thousands of Georgians. I was a political leader, helping get good things done in a bipartisan fashion at the state capitol and fighting off legislation that would have hurt vulnerable communities. All of these experiences are tied into what I'm doing. And I'm excited about the opportunity to be the first African-American woman to be a governor, but I don't want to be the last. My job is to change how we think about leadership, to expand what the face of leadership looks like in America, and start here in Georgia. But it's also an opportunity to bring ideas to the table based on my experiences. I've seen the barriers to access to capital, and because I know those barriers, I'm the only candidate talking about how you solve them. I know what it's like to have parents who are aging and who need access to health care, but they're not old enough for Medicare, and so you've got to figure out how you're going to pay for it. I'm the only one in this race who's had to deal with that on a daily basis. And so I bring a set of experiences and a set of awarenesses, but more importantly, comprehensive, thoughtful plans for how we solve these problems. I'm running for governor because elections are about choices. And I want Georgians to understand that I'm the best choice for this because I am the most qualified, I have the best ideas, and have the best experience. And I will be a black woman when I do it, and that should be a good opportunity for everyone to celebrate.
Well,
All right.
Let me ask one more thing.
Okay.
We read in the last couple of days about 53,000 or whatever it was registration applications. Do you think that could cost you this election?
I am deeply disturbed by the continued usage of the exact match system by Secretary Kemp. We actually fought him on this in 2016 and we won. He was forced to restore the canceled registrations of 35,000 people, a little over 34,000. And we were able to get a federal court to tell him to stop it. Unfortunately, the state legislature in 2017 did it again. And he's relying on what is clearly a discriminatory policy and practice, and it has a disproportionate effect on people of color, in this case, African Americans. But it's wrong-headed that when you are trying to expand access to democracy, that you would undertake any set of policies that would make it harder to vote, especially those who have gone through the process. That said, we began this race with a very clear knowledge of who my opponent is. And having fought him for the last 4 years on expanding access to the franchise, I made certain that no matter what he did, we had the number of votes we needed to win this election. Luckily, we've been able to add thousands of people to the rolls, and we've got thousands more throughout the state of Georgia who haven't voted in previous years, but they've been hearing from us, and they're showing up in absentee ballots, at rallies, and we know that we've got the votes to win regardless of what he's done. And what I say to everyone is, look, if you are concerned about this, lift up your voice and make sure you vote to make certain that those 53,000, if they aren't able to finally cast a vote, that you vote on their behalf. But no, this is not going to stop us from victory. And as a close, what I would love to say to everyone listening is please visit our website, stacyabrams.com/vote, for more information on voting. Early voting starts October 15th. Absentee balloting goes on through November 4th. Election day is November 6th. And I humbly ask for all of your listeners to consider voting for me. In fact, not to consider. I ask for your vote for governor of Georgia.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all.